Welcome to Shawn Thinking Out Loud. I'm Shawn Armstrong. The title of today's episode is Ethics for My Side, Investigation for Yours. Donald Trump's latest financial disclosures are public. According to a certified 2026 annual disclosure covering the previous year, his business interests produced enormous income. Reuters calculated that more than $1.4 billion came from cryptocurrency ventures during 2025. His disclosure from the previous year had already reported more than $600 million in income from cryptocurrency, Gulf properties, licensing, real estate, and branded products. Those are extraordinary numbers. They also raise legitimate questions. Did people buy Trump-linked products because they believed in the products? Did they buy them because they supported the president? Did foreign actors put money in Trump-linked ventures because they saw a good investment? Did they believe spending money around the president's business interests might purchase access, goodwill, favorable treatment, or political influence? Those questions deserve examination, not slogans, not automatic acquittal because you voted for Trump, not automatic conviction because you hate Trump. Examination. Then we have the Biden family. Republican congressional investigators allege that Biden family members and associates received millions of dollars connected to foreign individuals and entities. They argued that the Biden name, Joe Biden's position, and the appearance of access were central to the family's business model. Democratic committee staff rejected that conclusion. They argued that the investigation failed to establish wrongdoing by Joe Biden or prove that he took official action for his relatives' clients. Those are competing conclusions drawn from a large public record. A serious person examines both. A partisan picks the one printed in the correct team colors and uses the other one to line the birdcage. Hunter Biden was convicted in federal court on 3 firearm felonies. He later pleaded guilty to 3 felony tax offenses and 6 misdemeanor tax offenses. President Joe Biden then gave his son a sweeping federal pardon covering offenses committed or potentially committed between January 1, 2014 and December 1, 2024. Donald Trump was convicted in New York on 34 felony counts and received an unconditional discharge. Then, after returning to office, Trump issued broad pardons and commutations for people convicted of crimes related to January 6th. Different cases, different facts, different laws, different defendants. But the public reaction followed a painfully familiar script. My prosecution is accountability. Your prosecution is persecution. My pardon is mercy. Your pardon is corruption. My family's money is legitimate business. Your family's money is influence peddling. My candidate deserves due process. Your candidate deserves a televised execution before lunch. That's the political culture we built. We no longer begin with a standard and then apply it to conduct. We begin with a person. Then we manufacture a standard that produces the result we already wanted. That isn't ethics. That's public relations with a law degree. Today we're going through 5 separate topics. First, Trump, Biden, and political family money. We're going to separate business success from political influence, disclosure from innocence, allegations from proof, and legal conduct from ethical conduct. Second, criminal justice as political entertainment. We're going to discuss investigations, indictments, convictions, pardons, prosecutorial discretion, and the strange modern belief that a criminal case only has legitimacy when your political enemies are in the defendant's chair. Third, the media's rotating moral standard. We're going to look at how the language changes with the party. One side gets questions, the other side gets scandals. One side gets context, the other gets a countdown clock and 6 former prosecutors yelling over one another. Fourth, religious hypocrisy and political idolatry. Conservatives don't get to condemn Democratic misconduct while treating Donald Trump as morally untouchable. Progressives don't get to accuse entire religious communities of criminal depravity because they dislike how these people vote. False witness doesn't become righteous because you typed it under a rainbow flag. And political idolatry doesn't become Christianity because somebody held a Bible near a campaign sign. Fifth, I'm going to lay out a standard that applies to everybody. Evidence, disclosure, equal enforcement, due process, proportionate consequences, and the willingness to admit when your own side is wrong, a rare and endangered skill in modern politics. Here's the central argument for the entire episode. If your ethical standard changes with the candidate's name, you don't have ethics. You have team merchandise. This is Messiah by Shawn Armstrong. It's a political critique of the Obama administration and the public image built around it. The book argues that a carefully manufactured savior figure helped reshape American politics while real policy decisions produced serious consequences. If you want a direct challenge to the mythology, this book is aimed straight at that target. What does Messiah cover? The book breaks it into four major areas. First, the economy. Second, foreign policy. Third, immigration. Fourth, Obamacare. Across those topics, Shawn Armstrong argues that the public narrative sold one story while the policies and consequences told another. This book is designed as a direct, issue-by-issue case against the image and legacy built around Obama. The book's structure is built around major fronts of argument. On the economic side, it goes after spending, dependency, labor participation, and policies affecting military families. On foreign policy, it takes aim at decisions tied to Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, readiness, and covert action. And on the domestic side, it argues that immigration policy and Obamacare created damage that was downplayed or ignored by supporters. Messiah is written for readers who aren't interested in political worship. It's for people who want a sharp critique, a long-form argument, and a clear challenge to the way Obama was framed in American public life. At 356 pages, it gives room to dig into the claim rather than just repeat bumper sticker talking points. It's available in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle. Shawn Armstrong is a retired U.S. Army veteran, lifelong student of history, and prolific author whose work spans military affairs, politics, economics, religion, martial arts, American history, and the unexplained. Drawing on more than 2 decades of military service and a lifetime of study, Armstrong writes with clarity, discipline, and practical judgment. His books form a lasting record of the knowledge he has earned through experience, research, and reflection, created to inform readers, challenge assumptions, and pass something worthwhile to the next generation. If you want the full argument, not the sanitized version, get the book and read it for yourself. Messiah is available on Amazon. Scan the QR code on screen or use the short link to order your copy. Read it, weigh the evidence, and decide whether the public image ever matched the political reality. Let's begin with the money. Not because money automatically proves corruption. It doesn't. Successful people make money. Businesses make money. Authors make money. Athletes make money. Politicians write books, give speeches, invest, own property, and sometimes enter office with businesses that exist long before the campaign started. The existence of wealth doesn't prove wrongdoing. The amount of wealth doesn't prove wrongdoing. A large number written in a financial disclosure isn't a confession. But political power changes the ethical equation. When a public official has private business interests, the public has a right to ask whether political power affects those interests. When members of a political family receive money from foreign-connected clients, the public has a right to ask what services were purchased. When a president's name appears on a cryptocurrency, hotel, golf course, licensing agreement, book, shoe, Bible, watch, or digital product, the public has a right to ask whether customers are buying the product, supporting the politician, or attempting to gain favor. That question doesn't convict anybody. It begins the examination. Donald Trump's defenders point to disclosure. They say the businesses are public. The income is reported. The Trump name has been a commercial brand for decades. Trump owned hotels, golf courses, real estate, licensing interests, and entertainment ventures long before entering politics. Those facts matter. Trump didn't suddenly discover real estate after being sworn into office. He didn't wake up in the White House and say, "You know what this country needs? A gold-plated hotel." He brought an existing international business network into public office. That distinguishes him from a politician who accumulates unexplained money through secret accounts. But an existing business network can still create conflicts. Disclosure gives the public information. Disclosure doesn't automatically resolve the conflict. Let me put that plainly. Reporting income tells us the income exists. It doesn't tell us every buyer's motive. It doesn't tell us whether anyone expected favorable treatment. It doesn't tell us whether policy decisions affected the value of the business. It doesn't tell us whether a foreign investor wanted profit, access, prestige, influence, or all four. The proper position isn't automatic guilt. The proper position is continued scrutiny. Trump supporters who celebrated investigations into the Biden family shouldn't suddenly develop a medical allergy to financial questions when Trump's name appears on the form. If foreign money moving around the Biden family deserves examination, then foreign money entering Trump-linked ventures deserves examination. That doesn't mean the conduct is identical. It means the standard is identical. Follow the money, identify the service, identify the buyer, identify the possible conflict. Look for official action. Do the homework. Now apply that to the Bidens. The central allegation against the Biden family was never simply that Hunter Biden earned money. Private citizens are allowed to earn money. Politicians' children are allowed to operate businesses. They're even allowed to be incompetent. Washington would lose half of its workforce if incompetence became a felony. The question was what Hunter Biden and other family members were being paid to provide. Republican investigators argued that the Biden family name and perceived access to Joe Biden was central to the business model. The 2024 Republican Committee report alleged that Biden family members and associates received more than $27 million from foreign individuals or entities and used a network of companies and transfers that made the money trail difficult to follow. Democratic committee staff argued that the evidence failed to show Joe Biden received improper benefits, directed the businesses, changed policy for clients, or participated in criminal activity. Both parts belong on the record. The payments and contracts aren't imaginary simply because Democrats dislike the investigation. The missing direct proof of official action isn't imaginary simply because Republicans dislike the defense. That's where partisan thinking breaks down. One side says, there's no court conviction, so there's nothing to discuss. That's wrong. Ethical corruption can exist without a criminal conviction. Influence can be sold without a prosecutor proving bribery beyond a reasonable doubt. A family can behave disgracefully without satisfying every element of a federal criminal statute. The other side says there were foreign payments and family contacts, so Joe Biden is proven guilty. That also goes too far. A payment to Hunter Biden isn't automatically a payment to Joe Biden. A dinner isn't automatically a bribe. A phone call isn't automatically an official act. A committee allegation isn't a jury verdict. A suspicious pattern deserves investigation. It doesn't remove the burden of proof. What if the story the public was told was never the whole story? The Biden family business, evidence, influence, and the question of corruption examines the evidence surrounding the Biden family's international finance network, foreign-linked transactions, and accusations of influence and access. This is a direct, evidence-driven presentation, not political babysitting for adults who still need slogans spoon-fed to them. For years, Americans were told there was nothing there. This book asks whether the answer holds up when placed next to bank records, shell companies, congressional testimony, whistleblower disclosures, foreign partnerships, and influence peddling accusations. It's built as a case file presented to the public because apparently asking powerful families normal questions is now treated like a hate crime against etiquette. The central question is simple. Was influence, access, and political proximity being treated as a family business model? The Biden family business doesn't pretend to be a courtroom verdict or a criminal conviction. It lays out a public-facing case file and challenges the reader to examine whether America still applies equal standards of scrutiny and accountability to political power. This is a 314-page political investigation available in Kindle, paperback, and hardcover. Shawn Armstrong lays out the record in a blunt, skeptical style. The book is built for readers who want to evaluate documents, testimony, public records, disclosures, and financial claims without being told by media gatekeepers which questions are too inconvenient to ask. The book is for readers who are tired of political protection systems, media excuse-making, and selective outrage. The normal citizen can be investigated, audited, exposed, and dragged through the system. Powerful families shouldn't get a velvet rope around the evidence. Read the record, follow the money, decide what it means. Get your copy of the Biden Family Business, Evidence, Influence, and the Question of Corruption today. Scan the QR code on the screen to open the Amazon listing. Read the evidence, follow the money, decide for yourself. Now let's reverse the names. Suppose Hunter Biden had launched a cryptocurrency while Joe Biden was president. Suppose foreign buyers had poured money into it. Suppose Biden branded products generated hundreds of millions of dollars while his administration regulated the industry involved. Republicans would hold hearings until the sun burned out. They'd ask who bought it, why they bought it, what they expected, and whether policy followed the money. Those would be fair questions. Now, suppose Donald Trump's son served on the board of a foreign energy company while Trump oversaw American policy connected to that country. Suppose the son had limited experience in that industry. Suppose business associates described the Trump name as commercially valuable. Democrats would describe the arrangement as obvious corruption before the first commercial break. Those would also be fair questions. The failure comes when either side treats the question as conclusive proof. Political families create risks because the family relationship has market value. That statement applies to the Bidens, it applies to the Trumps, it applies to the Clintons, it applies to the Kennedys, it applies to congressional families, governors' families, judges' families, and every other dynasty that has discovered public service pays much better when your relatives start consulting. The ethical concern increases when 5 conditions appear. First, the money comes from people with an interest in government policy. Second, the service being sold is vague. Third, the public official's name, image, office, or presence increases the value. Fourth, the family continues receiving money while the official holds power. Fifth, the public official's decisions could benefit the payer. Those conditions don't automatically establish a crime. They establish a conflict requiring disclosure and scrutiny. Disclosure is not innocence. Secrecy is not guilt. We still have to examine the conduct. Trump's 2026 financial disclosure is useful because it places income information before the public. That's better than hiding it. It also gives the public something to investigate. The same document that demonstrates disclosure can reveal the size of a conflict. Apparently, two ideas can be true at the same time. Somebody notified Congress. They've been waiting for written permission. The Biden investigation also produced public records, testimony, payment summaries, competing reports, and documentary disputes. That material should be examined. It shouldn't be dismissed because Republicans conducted the inquiry. It shouldn't be accepted blindly because Republicans conducted the inquiry. Partisan origin can affect credibility. It doesn't settle accuracy. The ethical test is the same for both families. What money changed hands? Who paid it? What was purchased? Was the service legitimate and identifiable? Was the payment disclosed? Was the public official involved? Did the public official take action? Did the payer benefit? Were laws broken? Were ethics rules violated? Were explanations consistent with the record? Those questions are neither Republican nor Democratic. They're adult questions. Our political culture avoids them because adult questions produce complicated answers, and complicated answers don't fit on campaign hats. Here's my conclusion on political family money. You don't have to prove a crime before raising an ethical concern. You do have to prove a crime before calling someone criminally guilty. You don't have to ignore suspicious patterns because the suspect belongs to your party. You do have to distinguish suspicion from proof. You don't get to call Trump's enormous business income automatically clean because it was disclosed. You don't get to call Joe Biden criminally guilty because his family's business relationship looks corrupt. Examine both, apply the same questions, demand the same disclosures, require the same evidence, and stop acting as if your candidate's last name causes the laws of ethics to take the day off. American criminal justice has become spectator entertainment. Investigations have opening acts. Indictments have television panels. Court appearances have motorcades and aerial camera shots. Every legal filing becomes a campaign advertisement. Every prosecutor becomes either a national hero or a Marxist assassin, depending on which defendant appears on the first page. The legal system was never free of politics. Presidents appointed attorney general, governors appointed prosecutors, district attorneys ran for office, Congress conducted investigations, the Justice Department answered to the executive branch. Politics has always existed around law enforcement, but we've now reached a point where millions of Americans decide whether a prosecution is legitimate before reading the charge. They ask one question: who's the defendant? If it's my political enemy, the system worked. If it's my political ally, the republic has fallen. That's not legal analysis. That's fandom with subpoenas. Donald Trump was convicted in New York on 34 felony counts involving falsified business records. The jury returned guilty verdicts. The court later imposed an unconditional discharge, meaning no jail, probation, or fine was imposed as punishment. Trump continued to deny wrongdoing and challenge the prosecution. Those facts can coexist. He was convicted. He disputed the case. The case involved an elected local prosecutor. The prosecution had political consequences. The sentence imposed no incarceration. You can criticize the legal theory. You can question prosecutorial judgment. You can argue that another defendant would have been treated differently. You can examine the evidence. What you can't honestly do is claim no conviction occurred. A jury verdict doesn't disappear because you bought the defendant's campaign merchandise. Now consider Hunter Biden. A federal jury convicted him on 3 gun-related felonies. He later pleaded guilty to federal tax offenses. Those weren't Republican social media rumors. They were criminal cases prosecuted by the federal government. They resulted in convictions and guilty pleas. President Biden then pardoned his son. The pardon covered federal offenses committed or potentially committed during a period of nearly 11 years. That pardon was constitutionally lawful. The president has broad pardon authority under Article 2. Lawful doesn't mean ethically unimportant. A president pardoning his son is a conflict so obvious it should arrive wearing a name tag. Joe Biden argued that Hunter had been selectively and unfairly prosecuted. Critics argued that Biden used presidential power to shield his family. Both arguments can be examined. But let's remove the sentimental padding. The president used an official constitutional power to protect his son from federal punishment. That happened. People can decide whether they believe it was justified. They can't pretend the family relationship was irrelevant. Then Donald Trump returned to office and issued pardons and commutations covering people convicted of offenses connected to January 6th. The proclamation commuted sentences for named individuals and granted full pardons to others convicted of covered offenses. It also directed the Justice Department to seek dismissal of pending indictments related to covered January 6th conduct. Trump supporters described the move as correction of an injustice. Critics described it as political protection for people who acted in support of Trump. Again, the pardon power was lawful. Again, lawful doesn't mean immune from ethical judgment. A president can use lawful authority badly. Congress can pass a lawful statute that produces terrible policy. A prosecutor can lawfully charge a case that reflects poor judgment. A governor can lawfully pardon someone for political reasons. Legal is the minimum standard. It's not the final word on ethics. A pardon doesn't prove innocence. A conviction doesn't prove every accusation ever made against the defendant. An investigation doesn't prove a crime. A dismissal doesn't always prove the original concern was fabricated. Legal outcomes mean specific things. Partisans keep forcing them to mean whatever the campaign needs. Now consider the different reactions. Many Democrats who defended the Hunter Biden pardon condemned Trump's January 6 pardons. Many Republicans who condemned the Hunter Biden pardon celebrated Trump's January 6 pardons. Each side had factual distinctions available. Hunter Biden was one person and the president's son. The January 6 Clemency Act covered a large category of politically connected defendants. The underlying crimes differed. The evidence differed. The sentences differed. The public interests differed. Those distinctions matter, but the ethical standard still has to remain stable. Does the pardon serve a public purpose? Is the president personally connected to the beneficiary? Did the beneficiary act for the president's political benefit? Is the pardon broad or narrow? Does it cover conduct unrelated to the stated justification? Did the president previously promise not to issue it? Does the pardon undermine equal enforcement? Those questions should be applied to both presidents. Instead, each side asks one question. Can my political consultant explain this on television without sweating through his suit? Prosecutorial discretion creates another problem. Not every crime is prosecuted. Not every suspect is charged. Resources are limited. Evidence varies. Witnesses disappear. Statutes expire. Jurisdiction matters. Intent can be difficult to prove. A responsible prosecutor must decide whether admissible evidence can establish each legal element beyond a reasonable doubt. That decision is different from public opinion. It's different from congressional investigation. It's different from a television commentator declaring that someone is obviously guilty because the Shawn used red letters. The public needs to separate four categories. First, conduct that looks bad. Second, conduct that's unethical. Third, conduct that violates a civil law or regulation. Fourth, conduct that can be proven as a crime. Those categories overlap. They're not identical. A politician may engage in ethically rotten conduct that prosecutors can't charge. A business arrangement may create a serious conflict without violating a criminal statute. A person may violate a technical law without being a part of the grand conspiracy. A prosecutor may win a conviction in a case that still raises concerns about selective enforcement. Our team-based culture destroys these distinctions. Trump's critics sometimes treat every allegation as cumulative proof of universal guilt. If one case is weak, they point to another. If another collapses, they point to a civil judgment. If someone questions the charge, they say the sheer number of cases proves the point. That's lazy. Each case must stand on its own evidence. Trump's defenders make the opposite mistake. They treat political motivation as proof of factual innocence. A prosecutor can dislike Donald Trump and still prosecute a real crime. A witness can have political motives and still tell the truth. A judge can issue a ruling you dislike without joining an international communist plot organized by suburban librarians. Motivation affects credibility. It doesn't automatically erase evidence. The Biden cases produced the same failure. Same Democrats treated Hunter's addiction and family tragedy as if they erased criminal conduct. Addiction can explain behavior. It can affect sentencing. It can produce sympathy. It doesn't make a false firearm statement true. It doesn't pay a tax bill. It doesn't turn a felony into a wellness seminar. Some Republicans treated Hunter's convictions as proof that every allegation against Joe Biden has also been proven. They hadn't. Hunter's firearm convictions concerned Hunter. His tax case concerned Hunter. Those cases may provide context for examining his finances. They don't automatically prove that Joe Biden accepted bribes or changed policy. A son's conviction isn't hereditary. Neither is innocence. We also need to discuss official misconduct inside investigations. Law enforcement agencies are institutions run by human beings. Human beings have politics. They make mistakes. They protect careers. They form biases. They leak. They overreach. They sometimes become convinced that their target is dangerous enough to justify cutting corners. That possibility requires oversight. But oversight must use evidence. Calling the Justice Department weaponized doesn't prove weaponization. Calling investigators nonpartisan professionals doesn't prove neutrality. Look at the decisions. Look at departures from standard procedure. Look at communications. Look at charging patterns. Look at witness treatment. Look at whether comparable defendants received comparable treatment. Look at whether evidence was concealed, altered, leaked, or misrepresented. The standard is conduct, not institutional branding. The FBI seal isn't holy water. A congressional letterhead isn't a lie detector. Equal justice doesn't mean every politically connected person receives the same outcome. It means comparable conduct receives comparable treatment under comparable facts. That final part matters. Comparable facts. People love comparing two cases after deleting every inconvenient difference. One defendant cooperated. The other obstructed. One returned documents. The other concealed them. One had evidence of intent. The other had evidence of negligence. One acted while in office. The other acted as a private citizen. One case involved federal law. The other involved state law. Then somebody points at the different result and screams hypocrisy. Sometimes the result is hypocrisy. Sometimes the cases are different. You have to read past the headline to determine which one you're dealing with. A terrible burden, apparently. The criminal justice standard should be simple. Investigate when credible evidence supports investigation. Charge when admissible evidence supports every element. Provide due process. Use the same legal interpretation for comparable defendants. Respect the verdict. Permit appeals. Review official misconduct. Treat pardons as lawful acts subject to political and ethical judgment. Stop cheering prosecution merely because you hate the accused. Stop calling every persecution merely because you love him. The courthouse isn't supposed to be a campaign rally with worse parking. What if the story the public was told was never the whole story? The Biden family business, evidence, influence, and the question of corruption examines the evidence surrounding the Biden family's international finance network, foreign linked transactions, and accusations of influence and access. This is a direct, evidence driven presentation, not political babysitting for adults who still need slogans spoon fed to them. For years, Americans were told there was nothing there. This book asks whether the answer holds up when placed next to bank records, shell companies, congressional testimony, whistleblower disclosures, foreign partnerships, and influence peddling accusations. It's built as a case file presented to the public because apparently asking powerful families normal questions is now treated like a hate crime against etiquette. The central question is simple. Was influence, access, and political proximity being treated as a family business model? The Biden family business doesn't pretend to be a courtroom verdict or a criminal conviction. It lays out a public-facing case file and challenges the reader to examine whether America still applies equal standards of scrutiny and accountability to political power. This is a 314-page political investigation available in Kindle, paperback, and hardcover. Shawn Armstrong lays out the record in a blunt, skeptical style. The book is built for readers who want to evaluate documents, testimony, public records, disclosures, and financial claims without being told by media gatekeepers which questions are too inconvenient to ask. The book is for readers who are tired of political protection systems, media excuse-making, and selective outrage. If a normal citizen can be investigated, audited, exposed, and dragged through the system, powerful families shouldn't get a velvet rope around the evidence. Read the record, follow the money, decide what it means. Get your copy of the Biden Family Business, Evidence, Influence, and the Question of Corruption today. Scan the QR code on the screen to open the Amazon listing. Read the evidence, follow the money, decide for yourself. The American media has a trust problem. Gallup reported in 2025 that only 28% of Americans expressed a great deal or fair amount of trust in mass media. The partisan split was severe. Pew has also documented major differences in which news organizations Republicans and Democrats use and trust. The parties increasingly inhabit separate information channels, each with its own villains, heroes, vocabulary, omissions, and emergency graphics. People often blame this entirely on biased journalists. Journalistic bias is real, but the explanation is incomplete. Audiences reward bias. Partisan viewers don't always want information. They want confirmation delivered by someone with good hair and a serious desk. They want to be told that their side is decent, intelligent, victimized, and moments away from complete victory. They want the other side described as criminal, stupid, dangerous, and secretly collapsing. News companies learned the lesson. Give the audience uncertainty, and they change the channel. Give them outrage, and they subscribe. The media's moral standard rotates because the audience's moral standard rotates. Watch the language. When a politician your outlet dislikes earns money, the story uses words such as conflict, scheme, cash flow, foreign ties, profiting from office, ethical cloud. When a politician your outlet favors earns money, the language becomes business activity, private transaction, no direct evidence, family matter, long-standing enterprise, complicated financial relationship. Same alphabet, different weather report. The headline writer decides whether you're about to read an investigation or a bedtime story. Consider Trump's business income. A responsible report would state the income, identify the businesses, describe potential conflicts, explain what's known, describe what's disputed, and avoid calling a conflict a proven bribe without evidence. A partisan anti-Trump outlet may begin with corruption and work backward. A partisan pro-Trump outlet may begin with business success and stop before reaching the conflict. Both approaches cheat the audience. Income can demonstrate business success. It can also create conflicts. A disclosure can demonstrate compliance with reporting rules. It can also expose how much private income overlaps with political power. Those aren't contradictions. That's what the record contains. Now consider the Biden family. A responsible report would identify documented payments, explain the family relationships, describe what witnesses said, state the Republican investigators' claims, state the Democratic response, explain the absence or presence of direct evidence, and distinguish Hunter Biden's conduct from Joe Biden's. A partisan conservative outlet may call every payment a bribe before establishing an official act. A partisan liberal outlet may dismiss every payment as irrelevant because no criminal conviction tied Joe Biden to the arrangement. Again, both approaches cheat the audience. The public record contains serious questions. It also contains evidentiary limitations. A journalist is supposed to report both. A campaign surrogate gets paid to hide one. Too many news programs can no longer remember which job they accepted. The media also rotates its standard for anonymous sources. When an anonymous source attacks the favored politician, the source is described as politically motivated, disgruntled, unreliable, or lacking first-hand knowledge. When an anonymous source attacks the opposing politician, the same lack of identity becomes necessary protection for a courageous insider. Anonymous sources sometimes provide accurate and important information. They also sometimes spread factual gossip without accountability. The standard should remain the same. How close was the source to the event? Did the source witness it? Is there documentary support? Has another source confirmed it? Does the reporter know the source's motive? Did the publication give the accused a chance to respond? Does the article distinguish fact from allegation? Those questions apply no matter who benefits. Then we have the magic phrase, no evidence. This phrase can mean several different things. It can mean investigators found literally nothing. It can mean investigators found circumstantial evidence but no direct proof. It can mean evidence exists but doesn't establish a crime. It can mean the speaker dislikes the source. It can mean the evidence has not yet been publicly released. It can mean a campaign spokesman wants the interview to end. The phrase is often used as a trapdoor. Drop the phrase, close the discussion, move to weather. Trump defenders say there is no evidence of corruption in his business income. That statement may mean no proven bribe has been established. It doesn't mean no conflict exists. Biden defenders said there is no evidence connecting Joe Biden to his family businesses. That statement may mean no direct proof established a corrupt official act. It doesn't mean Joe Biden never interacted with business associates or that the family name had no commercial value. Republican investigators and Democratic staff issued sharply different conclusions about the same inquiry. That disagreement is precisely why labels must remain accurate. No evidence is sometimes accurate. Sometimes it means no evidence meeting the particular standard I have chosen for this sentence. Specify the standard. No evidence of payment. No evidence of contact. No evidence of official action. No evidence of criminal intent. No evidence admissible in court. No evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. Those are different claims. A journalist should know that. Lawyers definitely know it. Political commentators often know it and pretend they don't because accuracy ruins the rhythm of the monologue. The media also manipulates moral judgment through timing. A story appears 2 weeks before an election. One side calls the timing suspicious. The other says the timing doesn't change the evidence. Then 4 years later, the parties reverse positions. Suddenly, the people who said timing was irrelevant become experts on political calendars. The people who demanded immediate disclosure discover patience, nuance, and the dignity of ongoing investigations. Timing matters. Evidence matters more. A late allegation should be ignored because it arrived late. It also shouldn't be accepted without verification because somebody wrote breaking above it. The public should ask, why did this emerge now? Who provided it? Can it be authenticated? What part is established? What part is inference? What part is campaign spin? That's how you protect yourself from both suppression and manipulation. The media's prosecution coverage is even worse. An indictment is treated as a verdict. A courtroom loss becomes proof of everything. A courtroom victory becomes total exoneration. A judge's procedural ruling becomes a declaration about the underlying facts. A prosecutor's decision not to charge becomes proof that nothing improper happened. A pardon becomes proof that the case was corrupt or proof that the pardoned person was guilty, depending on the partisan need. Legal documents are narrow. Media narratives are greedy. They consume every fact nearby. A criminal conviction establishes guilt for the charged offense, subject to appeal. It doesn't validate every political accusation against the defendant. A dismissal ends or interrupts a case for a specific reason. It doesn't always decide whether the conduct was ethical. An acquittal means the government failed to prove the criminal charge beyond a reasonable doubt. It doesn't certify the defendant as morally admirable. A pardon grants legal relief. It doesn't force the public to admire the conduct. These distinctions should appear in coverage. Instead, we get panels. One former prosecutor, one campaign attorney, one strategist pretending to be shocked, one host asking a 14-word question and interrupting the answer after 6. Humanity invented written records, and cable news responded by putting 8 people in tiny boxes. Partisan outlets also protect their audiences from uncomfortable stories. Conservative media may minimize Trump's business conflicts, statements, pardons, or conduct because criticism risks angering viewers. Liberal media may minimize Biden family evidence, institutional failures, progressive misconduct, or weak prosecutions because those stories disrupt the preferred political narrative. Audience capture turns journalism into customer service. The outlet learns which facts may make subscribers cancel. Editors begin avoiding those facts. Commentators learn which conclusions produce applause. Political coverage becomes a restaurant where the customer orders reality cooked to preference. Then everyone wonders why trust collapsed. The solution isn't finding a perfectly neutral outlet. That creature may be resting beside the honest lobbyist and the calorie-free donut. The solution is reading across sources and checking primary material. Read the disclosure. Read the indictment. Read the verdict form. Read the pardon. Read the committee report. Read the minority response. Read the transcript. Then examine how each outlet described the same document. You'll learn more from the difference than from another hour of panel discussion. Here's a practical media test. When your preferred outlet reports damaging information about your political opponent, ask what evidence supports it. When the same outlet dismisses damaging information about your political ally, ask what evidence is ignored. When the opposing outlet reports information you dislike, don't reject it based only on the logo. Check the source, check the document, check the quote in context. Check whether the correction, if one exists, received the same attention as the original accusation, and reverse the names. Would the outlet use the same headline if Trump became Biden? Would it use the same adjectives if Biden became Trump? Would you accept the same explanation? If the answer is no, the problem isn't only the media, the problem is the customer. Now we get to religion. This is where political hypocrisy puts on church clothes and hopes nobody notices the campaign buttons. White evangelical Protestants have remained one of Donald Trump's strongest political constituencies. Pew reported high levels of support during the 2024 election and continued strong approval during Trump's second term. That fact doesn't prove every evangelical worships Trump. Voting for a candidate isn't the same as declaring him morally perfect. Voters make comparative decisions. They consider abortion, religious liberty, judicial appointments, immigration, education, war, economics, crime, and cultural policy. A Christian can vote for a flawed candidate while openly acknowledging the flaws. That's political judgment. The problem begins when support becomes moral immunity. When the candidate lies, the lie becomes strategy. When the candidate insults someone, the insult becomes courage. When the candidate behaves badly, the behavior becomes proof that God uses imperfect men. When the opposing candidate behaves badly, suddenly everybody remembers the 10 Commandments. That isn't moral reasoning, that's selective theology. Christians should understand the problem better than anyone. Christian ethics condemn false witness. They condemn favoritism. They condemn dishonest measures. They condemn pride. They condemn worship of power. They condemn excusing wrongdoing because the wrongdoer is useful. The Bible does contain flawed leaders. It doesn't tell believers to rename every flaw as virtue. King David's failures weren't transformed into good conduct because David remained king. Peter's denial wasn't righteous because Peter later led the church. Human imperfection explains why leaders fail. It doesn't cancel the moral standard. Conservatives often make a valid argument. They say they aren't electing a pastor, they're electing a president. Correct. The president's job is to execute the law, conduct foreign policy, command the military, appoint officials, and administer the executive branch. A candidate's theological sophistication isn't the only qualification. But I'm not electing a pastor can't become permission to ignore every question of character. Character affects judgment. Character affects loyalty. Character affects truthfulness. Character affects whether a leader uses power for the public or for himself. You don't need a saint. You do need standards. If dishonesty disqualifies a Democrat from your moral respect, dishonesty must remain wrong when committed by a Republican. If adultery matters under one president, it can't become irrelevant under another. If financial conflicts matter when the Biden family is involved, they must matter when the Trump family is involved. If abuse of presidential power concerns you under Obama or Biden, it has to concern you under Trump. The policy differences may still lead you to support one candidate, but support doesn't require intellectual castration. You can vote for someone and criticize them. You can defend a policy and condemn misconduct. You could say the alternative was worse without saying your choice was flawless. Those sentences aren't complicated. Our politics makes them sound like advanced mathematics. Progressives have their own religious hypocrisy. Many progressives claim moral superiority while rejecting basic standards of evidence and fairness. They condemn broad stereotypes when aimed at protected groups, then make sweeping accusations against Christians, conservatives, rural voters, Trump supporters, or white men. I recently saw social media claim accusing millions of MAGA evangelicals of tolerating child abuse because of their politics. No evidence, no identified offenders, no distinction among individuals, just a mass accusation of one of the most serious crimes a human being can commit. That isn't moral courage. That's defamation sprayed over a population. If a conservative made an equivalent accusation against millions of Muslims, gay people, immigrants, or Democrats, progressive activists would correctly identify the statement as hateful and dishonest. The standard doesn't change because the target is evangelical. False accusations remain false accusations. Group hatred remains group hatred. Political disgust doesn't produce evidence. This is where secular political movements often begin behaving like religions while denying they have any religious impulse. They create doctrines that can't be questioned. They identify heretics. They demand public confession. They offer social absolution to people who repeat the approved language. They condemn entire classes of people as morally contaminated. They treat political disagreement as evidence of personal evil. Then they accuse Christians of imposing morality. Everybody has moral standards. The question is whether the standards are coherent. A progressive activist who demands evidence in sexual abuse cases involving one political group must demand evidence in cases involving another. A conservative Christian who believes lying is sinful must not excuse lying because their liar appoints judges he likes. A secular humanist who claims to value fairness can't abandon fairness when the accused attends the wrong church. A pastor who preaches against idolatry must not turn Sunday service into a campaign event. Political idolatry happens when loyalty to a leader replaces loyalty to principle. The leader becomes incapable of genuine wrongdoing. Every criticism becomes persecution. Every legal problem becomes a conspiracy. Every defeat becomes fraud. Every contradiction becomes strategic genius. Every former ally who speaks against the leader becomes a traitor. This behavior appears on the left and right. Barack Obama's supporters sometimes treated criticism of his administration as proof of racism. Joe Biden's supporters sometimes treated questions about his family as attacks on a grieving father. Trump's supporters often treat criticism of Trump as proof of mental illness, betrayal, or hatred of America. The politician's identity consumes the argument. Policies disappear, evidence disappears, the leader becomes the standard. That's dangerous in politics. It's grotesque in religion. No politician is your savior. No party is your church. No campaign platform is Scripture. No election victory forgives sin. And no losing candidate becomes a martyr merely because prosecutors acted badly. Religious voters should apply 3 rules. First, never call evil good because the person committing it helps your political cause. Second, never invent evil against an opponent because the accusations helps your political cause. Third, remember that political effectiveness and moral goodness are different measurements. A president can implement good policy while behaving badly. A president can behave personally decently while implementing destructive policy. A voter has to consider both. That's hard. Hard decisions are part of citizenship. Pretending your candidate possesses every virtue isn't decision-making, it's emotional outsourcing. Progressive moralists should apply the same rules. Don't accuse entire groups of child abuse. Don't call everyone racist because they reject your policy. Don't describe every religious disagreement as hatred. Don't demand due process for your allies and social execution for opponents. Don't preach inclusion while excluding everyone who rejects your doctrine. Don't claim compassion while treating half the country as morally diseased. You can't build a moral society using collective guilt and fabricated accusations. Conservative Christians should stop pretending they protect Christianity when they turn faith into campaign branding. Christianity survived Rome. It can survive criticism of Donald Trump. It can survive admitting that a Republican president has conflicts. It can survive saying a pardon was wrong. It can survive refusing to defend every insult. What it can't survive with credibility is the public spectacle of people preaching permanent truth while editing the truth every election season. Progressives should stop pretending they protect democracy while making criminal accusations against entire voting blocs. Democracy requires disagreement without collective demonization. It requires evidence. It requires the possibility that your opponent is wrong rather than evil. Sometimes the opponent is evil. Prove it. Don't chant it. The religious and moral standard is simple. Tell the truth. Judge conduct consistently. Reject false accusations. Refuse to worship political power. Defend justice even when justice inconveniences your side. That standard will leave you politically homeless on certain days. Good. A conscience that always agrees with your party isn't a conscience. It's an employee. This is Messiah by Shawn Armstrong. It's a political critique of the Obama administration and the public image built around it. The book argues that a carefully manufactured savior figure helped reshape American politics while real policy decisions produced serious consequences. If you want a direct challenge to the mythology, this book is aimed straight at that target. What does Messiah cover? The book breaks it into 4 major areas. First, the economy. Second, foreign policy. Third, immigration. Fourth, Obamacare. Across those topics, Shawn Armstrong argues that the public narrative sold one story while the policies and consequences told another. This book is designed as a direct, issue-by-issue case against the image and legacy built around Obama. The book's structure is built around major fronts of argument. On the economic side, it goes after spending, dependency, labor participation, and policies affecting military families. On foreign policy, it takes aim at decisions tied to Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, readiness, and covert action. And on the domestic side, it argues that immigration policy and Obamacare created damage that was downplayed or ignored by supporters. Messiah is written for readers who aren't interested in political worship. It's for people who want a sharp critique, a long-form argument, and a clear challenge to the way Obama was framed in American public life. At 356 pages, it gives room to dig into the claim rather than just repeat bumper sticker talking points. It's available in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle. Shawn Armstrong is a retired U.S. Army veteran, lifelong student of history, and prolific author whose work spans military affairs, politics, economics, religion, martial arts, American history, and the unexplained. Drawing on more than 2 decades of military service and a lifetime of study, Armstrong writes with clarity, discipline, and practical judgment. His books form a lasting record of the knowledge he has earned through experience, research, and reflection, created to inform readers, challenge assumptions, and pass something worthwhile to the next generation. If you want the full argument, not the sanitized version, get the book and read it for yourself. Messiah is available on Amazon. Scan the QR code on screen or use the short link to order your copy. Read it, weigh the evidence, and decide whether the public image ever matched the political reality. If you want a book that pulls no punches, start here. The American Left, From Liberalism to Despotism, examines how a movement that once spoke the language of liberty drifted toward control, coercion, and ideological rigidity. Shawn Armstrong gives you a direct, readable analysis of that political transformation and why it matters right now. This is not a shallow political rant. The book walks through the ideas, movements, and historical shifts that changed the American left over time. It digs into the civil rights era, later radical politics, feminism, identity politics, and the broader ideological changes that shaped the current moment. The book is focused and accessible. At 218 pages, it gives you a tight, argument-driven read without wasting your time. If you want political history, ideological analysis, and a blunt perspective on the modern left, this book is built for you. Shawn Armstrong writes the way he talks, direct, disciplined, and clear. His background includes a 23-year military career, and that no-nonsense approach carries into his writing. If you're tired of vague political commentary, his voice will feel a lot more honest than the usual noise. If this sounds like your kind of book, grab a copy now. Scan the QR code on the screen to go straight to the Amazon listing. The American Left, From Liberalism to Despotism, is available in Kindle and paperback, and it's ready when you are. Dismantling the Republic is a blunt political critique, what Shawn Armstrong sees as America's descent into tribalism. This book takes aim at elite influence, fractured citizenship, border confusion, middle-class decline, and the weakening of the constitutional order. At the center of this book is a hard question. How does a republic come apart? Armstrong's answer is that elite political and cultural forces have pushed Americans away from shared citizenship and toward tribal thinking, mistrust, and fracture. Across 7 chapters, Armstrong tackles a string of linked problems: citizenship, middle-class instability, borders and sovereignty, tribal politics, unaccountable power, questions about the Constitution, and the pressure of globalism and the so-called Great Reset. The chapter material is pointed. Armstrong argues that citizenship has been diluted, the middle class has been weakened, identity politics has displaced civic unity, and unelected or unaccountable power has expanded where it shouldn't. The book is meant to provoke argument, not hide from it. This is for readers who want a direct political critique. If you care about citizenship, sovereignty, democracy, and whether America can still function as a republic instead of a patchwork of political tribes, this book is aimed right at you. Written by Shawn Armstrong, this book carries a plain-spoken tone shaped by a working-class background and a long military career. That mix gives the argument a grounded edge. It reads like somebody trying to say something clear, not somebody hiding behind fashionable language. If you want a short, direct political critique about tribalism, citizenship, and the future of the American Republic, get the book. Scan the QR code and pick up Dismantling the Republic on Amazon, written by Shawn Armstrong. Available now. Consent of the Governed takes a simple but essential question and treats it with a seriousness it deserves. What makes government legitimate, and why does that still matter today? Shawn Armstrong digs into the Federalist Papers and shows why consent is not some dusty slogan. It's the foundation of self-government. At the center of this book is a basic truth. Government is only legitimate when it rests on the consent of the governed. Armstrong walks the readers through that principle with clarity, using the Federalist Papers to show how the founders understood power, authority, and the limits that keep liberty alive. This is a full collection of essays, not a thin overview. Across 452 pages, Armstrong examines the Federalist Papers through the work of Hamilton, Madison, and Jay, dealing with political philosophy, rights, and the balance of power. The point is not to bury you in jargon. The point is to make the ideas usable. What gives this book teeth is that it doesn't stay in the 18th century. Armstrong connects the principles in the Federalist Papers to modern arguments about power, liberty, and the role of the citizen. If you want to understand today without pretending the past is irrelevant, this book gives you a solid footing. This is for readers who actually want substance: scholars, history buffs, political enthusiasts, and regular citizens who are tired of shallow civics and cheap talking points. If you want to think more clearly about government and your place in it, this book gives you real material to work with. Consent of the Governed is written by Shawn Armstrong, whose background brings a grounded voice to a serious subject. He writes with clarity, keeps the argument moving, and never loses sight of the fact that these ideas matter because people still live under governments that either respect consent or abuse power. If you want a stronger grasp of the principle that makes Republican government legitimate, get the book. Scan the QR code and pick up Consent of the Governed on Amazon. Consent of the Governed by Shawn Armstrong. Serious history, clear argument, and relevance that reaches straight into the present day. What if the story the public was told was never the whole story? The Biden family business, evidence, influence, and the question of corruption examines the evidence surrounding the Biden family's international finance network, foreign-linked transactions, and accusations of influence and access. This is a direct, evidence-driven presentation, not political babysitting for adults who still need slogans spoon-fed to them. For years, Americans were told there was nothing there. This book asks whether the answer holds up when placed next to bank records, shell companies, congressional testimony, whistleblower disclosures, foreign partnerships, and influence peddling accusations. It's built as a case file presented to the public because apparently asking powerful families normal questions is now treated like a hate crime against etiquette. The central question is simple. Was influence, access, and political proximity being treated as a family business model? The Biden family business doesn't pretend to be a courtroom verdict or a criminal conviction. It lays out a public-facing case file and challenges the reader to examine whether America still applies equal standards of scrutiny and accountability to political power. This is a 314-page political investigation available in Kindle, paperback, and hardcover. Shawn Armstrong lays out the record in a blunt, skeptical style. The book is built for readers who want to evaluate documents, testimony, public records, disclosures, and financial claims without being told by media gatekeepers which questions are too inconvenient to ask. The book is for readers who are tired of political protection systems, media excuse-making, and selective outrage. The normal citizen can be investigated, audited, exposed, and dragged through the system. Powerful families shouldn't get a velvet rope around the evidence. Read the record, follow the money, decide what it means. Get your copy of the Biden Family Business, Evidence, Influence, and the Question of Corruption today. Scan the QR code on the screen to open the Amazon listing. Read the evidence, follow the money, decide for yourself. We spent 4 segments identifying the disease. Now we need a standard. Not a Republican standard, not a Democrat standard, not a Trump exception, not a Biden exception. A standard that survives a change of names. The test has 8 parts. Write them down. Use them whenever the next scandal arrives, because another one will arrive. Washington produces scandals the way Florida produces humidity. Rule 1. State the exact allegation. Don't begin with a label. Begin with the alleged conduct. Trump is corrupt is a conclusion. Foreign buyers placed money into a Trump-linked business while Trump held authority over policies affecting that industry is an allegation that can be examined. Joe Biden ran a crime family is a conclusion. Biden family members received foreign-linked payments while Joe Biden's political position contributed value to the family name is an allegation that can be examined. Prosecutors weaponized justice is a conclusion. Prosecutors departed from normal charging practices, used a novel legal theory, or treated comparable defendants differently is an allegation that can be tested. Precise allegations produce precise evidence. Vague labels produce noise. When somebody can't explain the alleged conduct without repeating a nickname, they probably haven't examined the case. Rule 2, sort the evidence. Evidence has categories: documents, bank records, contracts, emails, recorded statements, sworn testimony, unsworn allegations, anonymous accounts, committee reports, court findings, jury verdicts, expert analysis, circumstantial evidence, direct evidence. Each category has weight. A bank record can prove money moved. It may not prove why. A photograph can prove two people were together. It may not prove what they discussed. A witness can provide first-hand evidence. The witness may also have a motive to lie. A committee report can organize evidence. The committee may also frame the evidence politically. A criminal conviction proves the charged offense was established to the jury under the governing standard, subject to appeal. It doesn't prove every rumor surrounding the defendant. Sort the evidence before drawing the conclusion. Don't stack 10 weak allegations and call the pile proof. Don't dismiss circumstantial evidence merely because no one signed a confession. Most serious cases involve multiple evidence types. Rule 3. Identify the financial conflict. Ask who paid whom. Ask what service was purchased. Ask whether the service was described in writing. Ask whether the price made sense. Ask whether the public official's name increased the value. Ask whether the payer had business before the government. Ask whether the official or family member disclosed the relationship. Ask whether government action followed the payment. Apply that test to Trump-linked businesses. Apply it to Biden family businesses. Apply it to foundations, speaking fees, book deals, consulting contracts, board seats, investment funds, real estate, cryptocurrency, and every other respectable container Washington uses for money. A payment can be legal and still create a conflict. A conflict can be serious without proving a bribe. A bribe requires evidence connecting a thing of value to official action or an agreement. Don't lower that requirement for your enemy. Don't raise it beyond reach for your ally. Rule 4. Separate legal, ethical, and political judgment. Legal judgment asks whether conduct violated a law that can be proven in court. Ethical judgment asks whether the person abused trust, concealed a conflict, misused office, lied, or placed private interest above public duty. Political judgment asks whether the conduct should affect public support, election results, confirmation, appointments, committee assignment, or public credibility. These judgments overlap. They're not identical. Joe Biden wasn't criminally convicted in connection with the family influence allegations. That doesn't require voters to consider every family arrangement acceptable. Donald Trump's financial disclosure report income. That doesn't require voters to consider every conflict resolved. Hunter Biden received a pardon. That doesn't require the public to treat his convictions as imaginary. January 6 defendants received pardons or commutations. That doesn't require the public to approve of their conduct. A legal outcome answers a legal question. It doesn't answer every moral and political question attached to the case. Rule 5. Protect due process. Due process isn't a reward for people you like. It's a protection for everyone. The accused has a right to know the charge. The government must prove the case. The defendant may challenge evidence. Witnesses may be cross-examined. Courts may apply the law. Appellate review must remain available. These protections matter most when the accused is hated. Anybody can support due process for a sympathetic defendant. The test comes when the defendant makes your skin crawl. Trump deserves due process. Hunter Biden deserves due process. A police officer deserves due process. A protester deserves due process. An illegal immigrant charged with a crime deserves due process. A political extremist deserves due process. Due process doesn't guarantee freedom from consequences. It guarantees the consequences follow a lawful process. Political activists increasingly want accusation to function as punishment. Fire the person. Ban the account. Remove the book. Cancel the contract. Destroy the reputation. Then investigate. That reverses justice. Some conduct requires temporary protective action. A credible threat may justify suspension. An immediate danger may require detention. But permanent judgment requires evidence and procedure. Otherwise, politics becomes organized rumor. Rule 6. Compare comparable cases. Don't compare two defendants merely because both names appeared on television. Compare conduct. Compare law. Compare intent. Compare cooperation. Compare obstruction. Compare criminal history. Compare evidence. Compare jurisdiction. Compare sentencing rules. Compare the public interest. Trump's New York conviction and Hunter Biden's federal firearms case are not the same case. The Biden pardon and Trump's January 6th clemency actions are not identical. Trump business income and Biden family foreign payments are not identical transactions. Different facts can produce different outcomes without proving hypocrisy. But different outcomes under genuinely comparable facts demand explanation. The phrase, both sides, isn't analysis. Sometimes both sides did the same thing. Sometimes one side did something worse. Sometimes the events share only a headline category. The job is to identify which. Rule 7. Reverse the names. This is the easiest test and the one partisans hate most. Take the story, switch the parties, keep every fact the same. Would you accept the explanation? Would you demand an investigation? Would you call the prosecutor corrupt? Would you defend the pardon? Would you excuse the business relationship? Would you dismiss the witness? Would you trust the anonymous source? Would you consider the financial disclosure sufficient? Would you call the conduct disqualifying? If your answer changes only because the name changed, you found your bias. You may still reach different conclusions because the larger records differ, but the initial standard should survive the name swap. Imagine Joe Biden had earned more than $1 billion from a politically branded cryptocurrency while serving as president. Would conservatives shrug and say he was a successful businessman? No. They'd investigate every buyer. They'd demand hearings. They'd question every regulatory decision. Apply that concern to Trump. Now imagine Donald Trump's son had received millions from foreign connected businesses while using his father's name and contacts as commercial value. Would Democrats shrug and say children operate independently? No. They describe the arrangement as corruption. Apply that concern to Biden. Imagine Joe Biden issued broad pardons to hundreds of people who committed crimes during a political event conducted in his name. Would Republicans call it national reconciliation? Probably not. Imagine Trump pardoned his own son for nearly 11 years of possible federal conduct. Would Democrats call it a compassionate response to selective prosecution? Probably not. The reversal test exposes the merchandise. Rule 8. Update your conclusion. Political debate treats changing your mind as weakness. It isn't. Changing your conclusion after receiving new evidence is evidence that your brain remains connected. An investigation may begin with a strong suspicion and end without enough proof. A dismissed allegation may later receive documentary support. A witness may be discredited. A document may be authenticated. A conviction may be reversed. A pardon may expose a conflict previously denied. A financial disclosure may reveal income that changes the ethical analysis. Your conclusion should move with the record. Don't marry the first headline. It won't respect you in the morning. Now let's apply the full standard. Application 1. Donald Trump's business income The allegations that Trump's business interests, including cryptocurrency, create opportunities for people with political interest to transfer money into ventures connected to the president. The evidence includes certified financial disclosures and reported income calculations. The disclosures establish substantial income. They don't automatically establish corrupt intent by every purchaser. The conflict is real because the president influences national policy affecting industries tied to his wealth. The legal question requires evidence of a prohibited transaction, bribe, or other specific violation. The ethical question asks whether the arrangement creates unacceptable exposure to influence. The political question asks whether voters tolerate that risk. The due process rule requires proof before declaring a crime. The reversal rule asks how Republicans would react if the name were Biden. The conclusion should remain open to new evidence about buyers, benefits, policy connections, and management decisions. That's a serious approach. Successful businessman isn't enough. Obviously, corrupt isn't enough. Show the transaction, show the conflict, show the action. Application 2, the Biden family business. The allegation is that Biden family members monetized Joe Biden's name, office, and perceived accessibility while receiving foreign-linked payments. The evidence includes payment records, business communications, congressional interviews, testimony about the value of the Biden name, contacts between Joe Biden and some business associates, Republican committee findings, and Democratic rebuttals. The evidence establishes that Hunter Biden and other associates conducted foreign business. It establishes that the Biden name had commercial value. It doesn't by itself establish that Joe Biden accepted a bribe or changed policy in exchange for payment. The ethical concern remains serious because public office can be commercialized through family proximity even without a criminal agreement. The legal conclusion requires more. The reversal test asks how Democrats would react if the family name were Trump. The conclusion should remain tied to specific evidence, not slogans. That approach permits strong criticism without inventing a conviction. Application 3, the Trump prosecutions. Each case must be evaluated separately. Political motive doesn't prove innocence. A conviction doesn't prove every case was fair. A novel legal theory deserves examination. A jury verdict deserves recognition. Procedural rulings must be read for what they actually decide. Appeals remain part of the process. People who claim to support law and order can't erase a verdict because they dislike the defendant. People who claim to support justice can't treat the number of charges as a substitute for evaluating them. Application 4, Hunter Biden's convictions and pardon. Hunter Biden was convicted and pleaded guilty in federal cases. His father pardoned him. The pardon was lawful. It created an obvious personal conflict. The addiction history may affect sympathy. It doesn't erase the offenses. The possibility of selective prosecution deserves examination. It doesn't automatically establish innocence. The broad time period covered by the pardon deserves political scrutiny. The standard should remain the same if a Republican president pardons a child. Application 5, Trump's January 6th clemency. The president had constitutional authority to issue the pardons and computations. The public can examine whether individual cases involved excessive punishment. The public can also examine whether a broad action protected political supporters because their conduct benefited Trump. The facts of individual cases matter. A nonviolent trespass case isn't the same as assaulting police. Blanket political language shouldn't erase those differences. The reversal test asks how conservatives would react if a Democratic president pardoned a large group that committed crimes against a left-wing political riot. The answer tells us something. This standard doesn't promise easy conclusions. It promises consistent ones. Sometimes consistency will force you to criticize the politician you supported. Sometimes it'll force you to defend due process for someone you despise. Sometimes it'll leave you unable to join either chanting crowd. That's acceptable. Citizenship isn't supposed to feel like attending a football game. You're not required to cheer every play because your side has the ball. You're required to judge conduct. Evidence before accusation, disclosure before trust, due process before punishment, equal enforcement before political celebration, consequences based on conduct, standards that survive a change of names. That's the rule. Everything else is merchandise. We've covered political money. We've covered criminal investigations. We've covered convictions. We've covered pardons. We've covered media framing. We've covered religious hypocrisy. And we've laid out a standard that can be applied to every politician, every family, every prosecutor, every journalist, and every political movement. Here's what I want you to remember. A financial disclosure is information. It's not absolution. A foreign payment is evidence of a transaction. It's not automatic proof of a bribe. A family relationship can create political value. It can also create serious conflicts. A congressional investigation can discover meaningful evidence. It can also frame that evidence politically. A prosecutor can bring a legitimate case against a political figure. A prosecutor can also use discretion selectively. A jury verdict must be recognized. An appeal must remain available. A pardon can be constitutional and still be corrupt, selfish, reckless, or politically damaging. The Constitution gives presidents authority. It doesn't give them immunity from public judgment. Donald Trump's business interests deserve scrutiny. Joe Biden's family business connections deserve scrutiny. Hunter Biden's criminal convictions were real. Donald Trump's New York conviction was real. Joe Biden's pardon of his son was real. Donald Trump's January 6 pardons and commutations were real. The facts don't stop existing when they make your side uncomfortable. That's the entire problem. Americans increasingly treat politics as identity. An attack on the politician feels like an attack on the voter. A criticism of the party feels personal. People defend conduct they would condemn in their neighbors. They invent crimes against people they've never met. They accept weak evidence because it hurts the opposition. They reject strong evidence because it hurts the team. Then they wonder why institutions have lost credibility. Institutions lose credibility when standards rotate. Prosecutors lose credibility when comparable conduct appears to receive different treatment. Journalists lose credibility when adjectives change with party affiliation. Churches lose credibility when permanent moral rules become optional during election years. Citizens lose credibility when their principles survive only until their candidate gets caught. You don't need to be neutral about policy. I'm not neutral about policy. You can believe one administration handled the economy better. You can believe one party has a better immigration policy. You can believe one president was stronger on foreign affairs. You can believe one movement is damaging the country. Political judgment requires choices, but ethical standards can't depend entirely on those choices. You can support Trump and demand answers about his business conflicts. You can oppose Trump and admit when a prosecution looks weak or excessive. You can support Biden's policies and admit his pardon of Hunter created a serious ethical problem. You can oppose Biden and admit that allegations against him still required proof. You can be Christian and vote Republican without treating Donald Trump as a religious figure. You can be progressive and oppose Trump without accusing millions of Christians of being child abusers. These positions require no special courage. They require honesty. That's become rare enough to look courageous. The next time a scandal breaks, don't begin with the politician. Begin with the conduct. State the allegation. Sort the evidence. Identify the conflict. Separate legal guilt from ethical judgment. Protect due process. Compare comparable cases. Reverse the names. Update your conclusion when the record changes. Do that, and you'll be wrong less often. You'll also annoy almost everyone. That's usually a good sign. If your ethical standard changes with the candidate's name, you don't have ethics. You have team merchandise. I'm Shawn Armstrong. This has been Shawn Thinking Out Loud. Ethics for my side, investigations for yours. Think for yourself, read the documents, question your own side first.